Hey guys, tonight we're taking a slow, sleepy stroll through a village in Bulgaria where the houses are made of mud. The roofs sag gently like tired eyelids, and the air smells faintly of clay and wood smoke. You won't find neon signs or fast food chains here, just winding footpaths, quiet dogs that never bark, and a population that builds everything with their bare hands and infinite patience. Imagine a place so quiet that you can hear bees arguing with each other in the lavender bushes, where the mud walls of a home seem to glow faintly in the moonlight, and where, if you're not careful, your foot might sink a few inches into a sun-dried patch of earth that was once someone's oven. It's beautiful, it's bizarre, and it's built entirely from dirt. You probably won't survive this place. Not because it's dangerous, but because you'll be offered a homemade rakia that tastes like fire and regret, and you'll have to politely pretend it's delicious while your soul tries to escape. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop a comment with your location and what time you're watching. I love seeing where everyone's tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It starts with a road that isn't really a road at all, just two tracks carved into grass by cartwheels that haven't rolled in days, maybe weeks. You pass a crooked wooden sign, carved in Cyrillic, so old it looks like it was written by someone learning the alphabet mid-sneeze. Beyond it lies the village, cradled in a small valley and wrapped on three sides by forested hills that rise like tired shoulders shrugging against the sky. There's no welcome committee, just a skinny dog trotting alongside you briefly before disappearing into someone's potato patch. A rooster crows, which is odd because it's 9 p.m. That's the thing about this place. Time doesn't really exist here. Or if it does, it's on break. The houses aren't houses in the conventional sense. They look like giant clay lumps with windows. Each one is shaped slightly differently, some with curves so smooth they could have been sculpted by water, others with quirky angles that suggest the builder got bored halfway through and went freestyle. Many are no taller than a man, but somehow feel big inside, maybe because of the way sound travels. Softly, slowly, as if even the echoes are being polite. And the material? Mud. Glorious, sticky, sun-dried mud, laced with straw, horsehair, and secrets. It's called cob, though the villagers don't call it anything. To them, it's just home. If you poke a wall, you'll get dust under your fingernail. If you sniff it, you'll catch notes of soil, hay, maybe a hint of goat. Not unpleasant, just honest. You'll notice there are no fences. Well, except for one made of rusted bicycle frames, which raises more questions than it answers. But generally, borders here are suggestions. Paths meander lazily between the homes, worn down by generations of slow, deliberate footsteps. Nobody's in a rush. And why would they be? The nearest supermarket is over an hour away, and half the village doesn't believe it exists. Out back, you'll see a woman crouched in her garden, planting beans using a stick and a rhythm. She doesn't look up. She doesn't need to. She knows the soil like an old friend. Each rock, each clump of clay has a story. That patch over there? That's where her grandmother fainted from sunstroke in 1948 and claimed to see the Virgin Mary. The village still hasn't decided whether to believe her. There's a distinct hush over everything. broken only by the occasional rustle of wind through mulberry trees, or the soft clatter of hooves on cobblestone. Yes, hooves. Because here, donkeys still do most of the heavy lifting. One trudges past you now, looking like he's seen too much, and would rather not talk about it. He's pulling a small cart loaded with firewood, empty glass bottles, and what might be a satellite dish. And speaking of glazes, peek through one of the windows. There's no glass, just wooden shutters. Windows here aren't for insulation, they're for storytelling. Every morning, someone opens theirs just to call out a greeting or comment on the weather, as if the air itself is part of the conversation. The smells shift as the night deepens. Early on, it's all earth and smoke. Later, you catch whiffs of simmering beans, pickled vegetables, and maybe a hint of sheep. Not sheep as in meat, just sheep, like they've absorbed into the atmosphere. You breathe it in without thinking, and it settles somewhere in your bones. By now, the stars are coming out, bold and unfiltered. No street lamps, no glow from distant cities, just a sky so dense with stars it looks like someone spilled sugar across black velvet. The Milky Way stretches over the village like a slow-motion lightning strike. And somewhere, out there, a barn owl hoots exactly once, then goes quiet, as if embarrassed by the attention. There's a rhythm to this place, a heartbeat, not mechanical, not scheduled, organic. It pulses in the creak of wooden doors, the crunch of dirt under sandals, the murmured good nights exchanged across garden walls. And you can't help but feel it in your chest, sinking your breath to its slow, deliberate tempo. You pass a young boy sitting on a stump, carving something with a pocket knife. He doesn't look older than 10, but has the posture of someone who's been through 3 wars and an awkward divorce. He's making a whistle from a piece of walnut branch, tongue sticking out in concentration. It squeaks slightly as he tests it. Too shrill for now, but he's patient, like everyone here. Because in this village, nothing is rushed. Not the buildings, not the stories, not even the aging. People here get old the way bread gets stale, softly, gradually, and with a certain kind of flavor. So as you walk deeper into the village, the mud paths start to feel more like veins. The walls seem to breathe with warmth, and you begin to realize that this isn't a place built despite the mud, but because of it. You wake to the sound of something dripping. It's not rain. It's too rhythmic, too deliberate, more like someone squeezing out a sponge in slow motion. And sure enough, as you shuffle outside, you see it. A woman gently wringing out a wad of wet cloth made from old curtains and donkey hair. She's washing her windows, which again, don't have glass. But she washes them anyway, because here, maintenance is part ritual, part meditation. You wander down the lane, barefoot now, because the soft, dry soil feels better than any shoes. It's like walking across powdered chocolate, except it doesn't melt, and there's no guilt. The morning sun hasn't yet cleared the hilltops, so the village is still wrapped in gentle shadow. Everything is hushed, except for the occasional coo of a pigeon or the creak of a wooden gate being coaxed open. And now you begin to notice just how everything, every home, bench, wall, and even the village well is made from the same thing: mud. Not just any mud. This is cob, a mix of clay-rich soil, water, straw, and sometimes a splash of animal dung for that extra oomph. It's stirred by hand, or by foot more accurately, and slapped onto a frame with joyful indifference to symmetry. There are no straight lines in this village. Everything undulates. A builder here doesn't use levels or rulers. They use stories. If the wall curves, it's because old Baba Stoyanka once leaned her chair there and needed a little back support. Despite its wobbly charm, Cobb is shockingly resilient. In summer, it stays cool inside. In winter, with a decent fire going, it traps heat like a grudge. It's even fire resistant, though nobody brags about that because bragging is considered bad luck around here. And the best part, if it breaks, you just patch it. Grab a shovel, a pail, and some straw. Maybe call a cousin. Within an afternoon, the wall's good as new, or at least good enough, which is the village motto, by the way. Good enough, unless it collapses entirely. There's something almost rebellious about this way of building. No cement, no reinforced steel, just earth. Raw and sincere. In a world obsessed with sleek lines and shiny surfaces, this village shrugs and says, "Nah, we're good with lumps." One house you pass leans ever so slightly to the left, like it's listening in on the gossip from the bakery across the lane. Another has been decorated with sun-dried corn cobs along the doorframe, like some kind of crunchy garland. A few have wildflowers growing directly out of the walls, which is either intentional or a very stylish accident. You duck into one home where the door has been left open, a silent invitation, not a mistake. The interior is dim, cool, and curved, not a single corner to be found. The walls swoop gently upward, cradling the ceiling in a soft dome. It's not big. 2 rooms, maybe 3, if you count the space behind the curtain, where an elderly man is snoring like an old accordion. The furniture looks handmade, and probably is. Chairs that creak as if they're tired of being chairs. A table with legs of slightly different lengths, so it wobbles gently when the breeze shifts. The floor is packed earth, smooth and warm, with a few hand-woven rugs thrown down for decoration or insulation, depending on your mood. One particularly quirky feature is the mud fridge. It's not a fridge at all, but a sunken clay cabinet built into the shaded side of the wall. Villagers keep cheese, yogurt, and fermented vegetables there, and it works surprisingly well. Scientists still argue about whether it's the clay, the airflow, or just old peasant magic. The villagers themselves just shrug and say, "It's always been like this." Speaking of which, let's meet someone. Outside, near the well, a wiry man in his 70s is repairing a wall with the calm efficiency of someone tying a shoelace. His name is Dimitar. He wears a straw hat that looks older than the European Union, and a pair of wool socks with sandals, because why not? He doesn't speak much, but when he does, it's either to share weather predictions based on ant behavior or to mumble about a chimney that fell over in 1992 and killed 3 chickens. Dimitar pats the cob mixture into a crack on the side of his home. His hands move slowly, lovingly, like he's massaging a giant clay elephant. He explains, without irony, that this house is his 3rd attempt. The first one melted in a storm. The second one collapsed when the goats tried climbing it. This one, he says proudly, is just right. You ask how long it took to build. 11 years, he says. 11 years, you echo, because that's longer than some careers. He shrugs. I wasn't in a hurry. The mud needs time. So do people. And that, in a sun-baked nutshell, is the village ethos. Nothing is rushed. Everything is intentional, or at least allowed to be weird until it makes sense. There's a story about a man named Bogo who decided to build his house entirely by moonlight because he thought sunlight made the cob dry too quickly. People thought he was mad until his house turned out to be the coolest one in summer. Now everyone calls it the night house and insists the walls glow faintly during full moons. Do they? Maybe. Depends on how much rakia you've had. By now, the village is gently waking up. A woman opens her window and begins shaking out a woolen rug so aggressively it startles a nearby rooster into silence. A child zooms past you on a tricycle with only one pedal. The bakery lets out a warm, yeasty sigh as the day's bread hits the oven. And for a moment, the whole valley smells like crust and smoke and something ancient. It's hard not to feel like the earth here is alive. Not metaphorically, but actually. The homes feel like they're breathing, shifting slightly, settling bones, as if the village itself is napping, and you're lucky enough to wander through during a dreamy exhale. The road ahead curves, naturally, into another part of the village where the walls are even more uneven, if that's possible. A cat sunbathes on a slanted windowsill that shouldn't logically hold its weight. And somewhere, behind one of the houses, a man begins to play a flute, made from elder wood. He's not good, but the birds seem to tolerate him. You follow the sound. You follow the flute, not because it's beautiful, but because it's persistent. Like a squeaky door that's decided to form a band. The sound twists around corners and floats across low mud walls, tugging you deeper into the heart of the village. Eventually, you find the source. A man perched on a stool, with one leg shorter than the other, playing a battered reed flute and staring at a chicken like he's trying to hypnotize it. The chicken stares back unimpressed. This man is Petar, though you won't hear his name unless someone yells it across the village square. Around here, introductions are optional, and names travel by volume. Petar is building something. A house? A shed? A cafe? No one's sure yet, including him. What he has built is about half a wall, some stairs that lead to nothing, and what might be a window, or it might be a niche for religious icons, depending on how the light hits it. Petar started this structure 6 years ago, and he's not done, nor is he in any rush, because building in this village isn't a project, it's a lifestyle. You do a little in the spring, a bit more after the harvest, and occasionally you stop for a full year because your aunt broke her ankle chasing a goat, and you have to help. Everything here is built on the assumption that time will be generous. And when it isn't, well, you rebuild. There's a famous tale in the village about a woman named Nadezhda who built her house 3 times before getting it right. The first version crumbled because she forgot to mix straw into the cob. The second collapsed after she hosted a wedding and 50 guests danced on the roof. The third still stands, and she swears it's because she sang to the walls as she built them. Scientists still argue whether sound vibrations help settle cob. The villagers argue back. Try it and see. You begin to notice that construction isn't centralized. There's no builder class or assigned roles. Everyone builds. Kids mix mud with their feet in shallow pits. Grandmothers slap it onto walls with palms calloused like tree bark. Teenagers lazily stack sun-dried bricks while listening to 2000s pop on hand-me-down smartphones. Even the village priest, a quiet man who wears a cassock patched with denim, once built an entire bell tower over 4 summers. It leans slightly, but so does he. The tools are basic: shovels, buckets, string lines, and the occasional spirit level that's mostly used as a bookmark. Instead of scaffolding, They use wooden ladders made from salvaged fence posts. Instead of blueprints, they use memory and instinct. There's no tape measure, only about this wide, and as high as that apricot tree. In modern cities, buildings chase deadlines. Here, the houses meander toward completion, and many are never quite finished. A new wall here, a new window there, a fresh coat of clay after the rains. Some say the village is always under construction. Others say it's always being born. And the patience? Oh, it's baked into the walls. You meet a couple, Irina and Bogdan, who have been working on their house for 9 years. They tell you this cheerfully, seated on a log that doubles as their dining bench. The roof still leaks a little, and one side of the house leans in like it's shy, but they're proud of it, especially the floor, which they relaid 7 times before getting it smooth enough for barefoot dancing. Irina shows you her favorite part, a hand-carved alcove where she keeps garlic, dried herbs, and a photograph of her grandmother laughing at a donkey. Bogdan gestures proudly at the ceiling beams. They were once a boat, he says. He found them half rotted by the river, dragged them back over 3 days, and scraped off the mold until the wood gleamed again. There's no waste, he says, only things waiting to become something else. In the background, a boy shouts something in Bulgarian. A wheelbarrow overturns. Laughter erupts. Somewhere, a dog howls in agreement. And that's the thing. You can't separate the people from the buildings. These homes reflect their builders. One is tidy and symmetrical. Its whitewashed walls decorated with painted vines. Another is rugged and half swallowed by climbing plants. One is bright with sunflowers. Another has windows so small it looks like it's hiding. These aren't just houses, they're autobiographies, mud-written memoirs. Even the village school was built this way. It took a decade, assembled wall by rotating crews of parents, grandparents, and enthusiastic children. The chalkboards were repurposed from old doors. The desks were carved from fallen trees during one of the village's notorious collective carpentry weeks, which sound more organized than they are. The school isn't very big, and the roof creaks ominously when it rains, but it works. And the kids seem smarter than most, possibly because they've inhaled more clay than the average city-dwelling toddler. You find yourself sitting under the shade of a mulberry tree, watching an elderly woman patch her wall with one hand, while sipping thick coffee with the other. Her name is Zoya, and she's known for building an entire guest room in her 70s because she didn't like her cousin's attitude. The room stands proudly today, slightly tilted and entirely unnecessary, but deeply satisfying. She tells you that mud isn't just material, it's memory. Every handful contains something, an argument, a song, a wedding toast, a late-night thunderstorm. She points at a crack in her wall and says, "That appeared the day my neighbor tried to paint her house turquoise. The earth was offended." You're not sure if she's joking, but that's the tone here, half serious, half folklore, entirely grounded. And so, you walk, past unfinished walls, abandoned windowsills, and roofs mid-construction, past children helping their parents in ways that mostly involve throwing mud at each other, past the smell of drying clay and warm goat milk, and that ever-present grounding scent of dirt that's been shaped by human hands. Every home in this village is a question mark. Will it be finished? Will it change next year? Will that extension ever get a roof? No one knows. That's not the point. The point is that it exists at all, held together not just by straw and mud, but by patience, thick enough to be its own kind of mortar. By now, the mud doesn't feel like just a building material. It feels like a personality, an old one, crumbly and stubborn. You begin to see the cob walls not as barriers, but as membranes, soft thresholds between inside and out, between yesterday and whatever comes next. You stop beside one of the oldest homes in the village, its surface a mosaic of patchwork repairs in varying shades of beige and ochre. There are tiny handprints in one section, made by children decades ago, now adults, living in the same village, possibly in the same house. You run your fingers along the grooves. The wall is warm, not metaphorically, actually warm. And that's not unusual. Cob walls, as it turns out, breathe. Not in the sci-fi, haunted house sense, but in a purely practical, almost poetic way. They absorb moisture when it's humid, release it when it's dry, like lungs made of clay. This constant exchange creates a kind of natural air conditioning. Temperatures inside stay remarkably even, cool in summer, cozy in winter. The walls don't just hold up the roof, they regulate the mood. Scientists still argue over the exact physics. Some say it's capillary action. Others insist it's thermal mass and diffusion. The villagers don't bother arguing. They just nod and point to their cracked but trusty thermometers nailed beside hand-painted icons of St. George. And in case you're wondering, yes, the cob does occasionally sweat. During heavy storms, it's not unusual to see tiny droplets beat up along the inner walls like dew on the back of a sleeping bear. You enter one of these homes. It belongs to a retired midwife named Elitsa, whose house smells like dried mint, damp stone, and homemade soap. She's been living here since the 1950s and proudly tells you she's never owned a fan or a heater. The walls do the work, she says, running her hand along the curve of her living room. Just treat them nicely. The ceiling sags just slightly, like a hammock mid-nap. A line of herbs dangles from wooden beams. Lavender, sage, something suspiciously sharp-smelling she claims is for sore throats and bad neighbors. The floor is packed dirt, but it's been polished with linseed oil until it shines like an old violin. You notice a small niche in the wall, a clay shelf inset like a shallow pocket, holding candles, a book of folk poetry, and a watch that stopped ticking in 1983, but still feels important. You ask if the house needs repairs. Always, she says, smiling, but that's how I know it's alive. And alive it is. Each creak, each subtle draft feels less like a flaw and more like character, like when a person clears their throat before speaking. The house has its own voice if you're quiet enough to hear it. Step outside, and the sun is now crawling up the opposite ridge, spilling over the tiled rooftops and lighting up the walls in hues of apricot and caramel. You notice how some homes have plant life growing directly from the cob. Moss, ivy, wildflowers. Not accidental. These homes are intentionally built to welcome the natural world. Bees buzz in and out of tiny holes in the eaves. Swallows nest in the corners of windows. Some villagers leave crumbs on the sills for birds. Others argue with squirrels. But all accept that their homes are part of a broader ecosystem, not apart from it. You pause beside a house where the walls have clearly been re-plastered multiple times. The old layers still peek through, like ghosts of renovations past. There's a vine growing up one side, trained carefully by someone with patience and possibly too much free time. The vine now acts as a seasonal barometer. If it wilts in July, rain is coming. If it refuses to flower in spring, someone in the village will get sick. A few villagers trust the vine more than their doctor. Cob apparently also acts as a kind of emotional sponge. There's an old belief, part folk wisdom, part poetic nonsense, that the walls remember what happens inside them. Sad stories make the plaster brittle. Laughter strengthens it. A house that's loved will stand for centuries. A house neglected, even with strong walls, will crumble faster. Whether you believe it or not, it's a comforting thought that your home knows you, holds you, maybe even likes you. Across the lane, a man is repainting his front door, using a brush made from hog bristles and a jar of something that looks like beetroot juice but smells vaguely of rust and vinegar. The door is a deep burgundy. Tradition, he says, to keep away bad spirits and nosy neighbors. He invites you to step inside just to feel the air. You do. And instantly your body reacts. It's cooler, fresher. No hum of appliances. No fan. Just the subtle, living coolness of a well-built cob house doing its thing. You sit down on a clay bench, molded directly from the wall, covered with a wool cushion that looks like it's seen more winters than most cats. The silence is tangible, like wrapping a blanket around your ears. The man tells you the house was built by his grandfather. Took 15 years. He spent more time smoothing the walls than actually raising them. Would redo whole sections if they dried unevenly. Perfection, he says, was not the goal. Harmony was. You nod, not just because it sounds wise, but because you can feel it. The house is harmonious, not symmetrical, not even particularly functional, but it feels right, like it knows how to listen. As you leave, he gives you a small lump of dried cob to hold, says it's a good luck charm. You pocket it, unsure whether to believe him, but also unwilling to risk offending the house. By late morning, the village is quietly bustling. Not noisy, just alive. Soft voices, gentle clattering, footsteps on packed dirt. Someone hammers something slowly, like they're not fully committed. Somewhere else, a child yells in delight after finding a frog in a water jug. No one scolds him. The frog is returned with ceremonial seriousness, and the jug is rinsed with even more ceremony. It's a village that feels less like it was designed and more like it grew. And the cob, the dust that breathes, is the nervous system, not flashy, not flawless, but pulsing quietly beneath everything. You breathe in. The air smells like soil and sun. You let it settle in your lungs. And for a brief, grounding moment, you can't imagine needing anything more than this. The longer you wander through the village, the more your eyes adjust to its logic, or more precisely, its lack of sharp angles. Nothing here is square. Not the houses, not the windows, not even the soup bowls. Everything curves, softens, leans, or swells like bread dough left too long in the sun. You pass a building that looks like it was inspired by a teardrop, one side broad and rounded, the other tapering to a gentle point. This, you're told, is deliberate. The wind, explains an elderly woman, stirring something suspiciously gelatinous in a bucket. Like smooth things. She taps the wall lovingly, then goes back to her stirring, which you now realize is mud, not food. These curved designs aren't just aesthetic whims. There's science, of course. Curved walls distribute weight more evenly. Domed ceilings create better airflow. Arches can hold more load than flat lintels. But no one here talks about physics or engineering. They just say, It feels better this way. And somehow, it does. Inside one of the homes, you find a kitchen with no straight surfaces. The shelves are built directly into the walls, rounded hollows carved into the mud, shaped to cradle bowls, herbs, and bottles of fermented plum juice that might legally count as paint thinner. Even the oven is round, a squat, belly-shaped thing tucked into the corner, with a soot-darkened mouth that looks like it might whisper recipes if you sit close enough. And the doorways, oh, the doorways. Some are ovals, some are keyhole-shaped. A few are so low, you're forced to bow every time you enter, as if paying respect to the space. One particularly odd doorway curves in at the top like a heart. That one's for weddings, someone tells you. We walk the bride through it 3 times. Once to leave her family, once to meet the new one, and once to confuse the spirits. Even furniture seems to resist linear thinking. Benches flow out from walls like frozen waves. Tables are rounded, their legs intentionally splayed like old friends leaning into gossip. Beds are often built into alcoves, caves within caves, with tiny curved shelves above them, holding candles, rosaries, and a dried orange slice that's definitely older than you. And yet, despite the irregularity, or maybe because of it, everything feels cohesive, like the whole village is participating in one long, slow improvisation. No blueprints, just instinct, weather, and a bit of luck. You reach the village square, if you can call it that. It's more like an open space where several paths happen to cross. A large sycamore tree grows in the center, its roots gently lifting the packed earth like wrinkles on an old face. Around it, people sit on mismatched stools, stumps, and one glorious bench carved from what must have once been half a fishing boat. Behind them rises the community oven, a rounded, whitewashed dome with a chimney that resembles a melting candle. It's used once a week, sometimes twice, and only when the village agrees it's time. Bread, pies, roasted vegetables, clay pots full of lamb and rice. Everything goes in together, marked by little sprigs of thyme or initials carved in dough. The oven never gets washed. That would be sacrilegious. It's seasoned, like a cast iron pan the size of a small car. An old man, with eyebrows that belong in a forest, explains the baking schedule. We plan it like a wedding. Everyone brings something. We argue. We forget the salt. We bake anyway. He laughs, then frowns at a pigeon that's eyeing his loaf. The pigeon wisely backs off. On the far edge of the square, you find a home that looks like it's grown directly from the ground. The transition from soil to wall is so subtle, you're not entirely sure where one ends and the other begins. A vine climbs across the facade, spelling out what might be a word, or just a very ambitious pattern. The window frames are made from twisted willow, and the shutters are decorated with small, irregular mirrors that flash in the sunlight, like the eyes of sleepy fairies. Inside, it's even rounder than expected. The walls curve upward into a domed ceiling, at the center of which hangs a small clay chandelier holding beeswax candles. The light glows amber, touching every surface with warmth. A man inside explains that he and his partner built the house by hand, just the two of them, over 8 summers. No machines, no hired help, just buckets, shovels, and a shared refusal to give up. He points out a curve in the wall where they almost gave up. Too wet that summer, he says. Every time we built a layer, it slumped. We cried, we shouted. Then we added more straw and sang to it. Eventually, it held. Scientists still argue whether singing affects cob cohesion. Some say vibration helps the layers bind. Others say it's superstition. But honestly, after hearing the way this house holds silence, you start to believe it might be true. One of the most intriguing things about these homes is how they feel at different times of day. In the morning, they hum with coolness. By midday, they radiate a quiet warmth. And at night, they seem to nestle around you, as if the walls are leaning in slightly, like a grandparent wrapping a blanket around your shoulders. No air conditioning, no insulation in the modern sense, just thick, breathing walls shaped by people who knew the land, listened to the seasons, and probably argued over whether goats or sheep are smarter. You return to the lane and watch a child chase a chicken in looping circles, both of them squealing. The mother, leaning against a wall curved like a hug, doesn't intervene. She's plucking lavender. Occasionally, she hums a tune that sounds like it's older than the hills. The scene feels curved, too. No sharp interruptions, no alarms, just a continuous, slow roll of life. Sunlight, birdsong, the gentle thump of bare feet on soil that remembers every step. And as you sit down on the edge of a rounded step, softened over time like sea glass, you realize you've forgotten how to hold tension in your shoulders. The village has smoothed you out too. The houses keep getting weirder, but in a way that makes perfect sense now. You round a bend and come face to face with one of the village's stranger sights. A roof shaped like an upside-down haystack, wide at the top, tapered at the base, and covered in a shaggy thatch so thick you half expect it to blink. It's not a one-off. As you look around, you notice several homes wearing similarly ridiculous headwear. The thatch is long and wild, draping over the edges like an unkempt wig. Some are adorned with flowers. Others have bundles of garlic tucked in the corners. One even has a small stork's nest right in the middle, complete with an unimpressed stork staring down at you like a feathered landlord. These aren't failed roofing experiments. They're deliberate, and they work. Thatched roofs, especially the kind made from rye straw or water reed, are astonishingly effective. They repel water, insulate heat, and allow air to circulate. Rain hits them and disappears. Snow settles gently, forming a cozy cap that actually keeps the house warmer. And wind? It passes over the curved, floppy edges like a sigh. No flapping shingles, no rattling tiles, just a soft, whispery resistance. One villager jokes that the roofs are weather wigs. Another insists that they're the reason his house has outlasted his 3 marriages. It's humble, he says, running his hand over the thick straw fringe. Doesn't shout, just stays. Scientists still argue about the thermal efficiency of thatch. Some say it rivals modern insulation. Others claim it's too risky, too flammable. But here, where people keep buckets of water at every doorway and know exactly when to shout fire and when to calmly say smoke, no one seems overly worried. They trust the roof more than they trust the internet, honestly. You duck under the eave of one such roof and find yourself in a cool, dry nook. The smell is immediate. Sweet straw, aged wood, and something faintly herbal. Possibly thyme, possibly mouse. A cat sprawls nearby, occupying the role of rodent control and village philosopher. Inside, the roof curves down like the inside of a mushroom. Light filters in through tiny round windows, more portholes than panes, casting golden shapes on the floor. You meet the owners, Milena and Todor, who proudly explain how they rethatch their roof every 8 years using straw harvested from a cousin's field. It's a family affair. Kids, cousins, neighbors. They gather, they laugh, they argue about the right angle of the bundles. And then they climb up and redo the whole crown in a weekend, fueled by bread, pickled peppers, and legally questionable brandy. Milena gestures toward the ceiling. In summer, it keeps us cool. In winter, we hear the snow land, like muffled applause. They show you the attic, not a proper room, but a loft space filled with drying herbs, bundles of garlic, and a large clay urn they claim is older than the Bulgarian alphabet. A stork has nested just outside the hatch. Todor says it's the same stork every year. You're not convinced, but you don't argue. Storks are a big deal here. They're considered protectors, good omens. Some houses even have small platforms built into the thatch, specifically to encourage nesting. A home without a stork is a home that's still waiting to be chosen. There's even a superstition. If a stork lands on your roof in spring, someone in the family will fall in love by autumn. If two storks nest together, a baby will be born in the village that year. No one questions it. Why would they? It's more reliable than most horoscopes. You step outside and look up at a row of thatched roofs lined like dozing mammoths along the hillside. The effect is strange and lovely. A village that doesn't just sit in the landscape, it blends with it. The roofs mimic the grassy ridges. The walls mimic the soil. Even the doors seem to open with the rhythm of the wind. Further along, you encounter a different kind of roof, flatter, tiled, with overhanging eaves supported by wooden beams carved with symbols, spirals, eyes, sunbursts. The locals call them whispers, protective marks. Some copied from books, others passed down by finger trace memory. One house has a roof painted with a thick white lime wash, reflecting the sun so fiercely it looks like it's wearing a halo. Another is lined with old solar panels, barely functional, but a statement nonetheless. The future is allowed here, as long as it doesn't get too cocky. In a quiet corner of the village, you come across a small gathering. 6 people in a semicircle, sipping from mugs and watching a teenager atop a ladder, delicately placing bundles of fresh straw on the highest ridge of a roof. Below, a woman calls out instructions in a tone that suggests she's done this many times. The teen fumbles. The bundle falls. Everyone groans. Then they laugh. The straw is retrieved. The climb begins again. Patience, again, is the rule. Roofing here isn't something you rush. It's not about speed or budget. It's about rhythm, weather, community. Straw needs to dry just so. Bundles must be tight, but forgiving. There's an art to it, passed on through observation more than instruction. You learn not by being taught, but by watching, failing, and trying again. And it's strangely satisfying to watch. The repetition, the care, the slow transformation of raw straw into a soft, water-repelling crown. It's the architectural equivalent of knitting a blanket for your house. By the time the teen manages to get 3 bundles in place without falling, the crowd below cheers. Someone brings out bread and cheese. Someone else opens a bottle. The cat reappears and is immediately fed something it definitely shouldn't eat. You sit on a low wall and take in the scene. Above, haystack roofs, catching the breeze. Below, dirt paths, sun-warmed walls, laughter rising like smoke. It's not just practical, it's poetic. You can't help but imagine the roofs dreaming at night, shedding snow, whispering to the storks, listening to the low grumble of donkeys passing beneath. They're not roofs. They're hats, helmets, halos. They're the village's way of saying, whatever comes from above, we're ready. You're not sure how you ended up at the town hall. There are no signs, no schedules, no loudspeakers announcing official business. Just a slow migration of people toward a central building that looks no different from any other house. Slightly lopsided, mud-built, with a door that sighs dramatically when opened. The only real giveaway is a carved wooden plaque hanging askew above the entrance, bearing the word Svet. Council. Inside, it's quiet. Not the tense, bureaucratic silence of government offices, but the drowsy stillness of a room that only wakes up when something interesting happens, which is almost never. A dozen mismatched chairs are arranged in a rough circle. A small clay hearth in the corner smolders lazily. There's a bookshelf with 3 titles, one on mushroom farming, one on Bulgarian folklore, and one that appears to be a recipe book, but has been hollowed out to store sewing needles. A woman named Radka is presiding today. She doesn't have a gavel. She has a wooden spoon, and she isn't banging it on anything. She's just stirring tea. The meeting begins with someone asking if the village should fix the bridge near the Blackberry Grove. It's been wobbly for 12 years, and last week a goat nearly fell in. This leads to a 5-minute discussion about whether that particular goat was especially clumsy or if the bridge is indeed a menace. Opinions are split. Nothing is decided. No one is upset. Then someone brings up the matter of a rooster who's been crowing at night. This sparks mild outrage, not because of the noise, but because he's violating the natural rhythm of things. Roosters, after all, have responsibilities. If they're confused, what hope do the humans have? A teenager suggests simply relocating the rooster to a different part of the village. An old man counters that this will only confuse it more. Another woman proposes singing lullabies to it until it adjusts. Someone scribbles something on a piece of bark. Nothing gets resolved. Everyone nods in satisfaction. That's how it goes. Village decisions aren't made in haste, or even really made at all. They sort of settle, like mud and water. After enough time, the important things float to the top. Or they don't, and people adapt around them. You sit in on this meeting for nearly 2 hours. No votes are cast. No agendas ticked off. At one point, someone starts knitting. At another, a pot of beans is placed on the hearth, and everyone becomes briefly distracted by its aroma. The most passionate debate of the day concerns whether the upcoming harvest festival should include accordion music, or if they should try something new this time, like whistling. A cat wanders in. Someone offers it a seat. It declines. This, you realize, is governance. Village style. No power suits. No microphones. Just tea, occasional consensus, and an unspoken agreement that if anything really matters, someone will deal with it eventually. Probably. There's something comforting about it. A government that runs on trust and inertia rather than urgency and red tape. You step outside, where the meeting gradually spills into the lane. Small knots of people continue talking about the bridge, the rooster, the weather, the mysterious footprints someone found near the compost bins. Some laugh, some grumble, but no one is stressed. No one is shouting. You've seen more tension in a library. A man offers you a piece of bread, still warm from his hearth. You take it. He nods once, then returns to his slow stroll. That's the closest thing to a campaign promise you'll hear all day. On your walk through the village afterward, you notice how decisions, when they do happen, leave their mark in small, quiet ways. A new coat of whitewash on a crumbling wall, a repaired fence post, a repainted bench with cushions now tied more securely. No fanfare, no ribbon cuttings, just things done, and sometimes undone. One woman, Yanka, proudly shows you a new footpath she and her nephew carved through a patch of wild sage. It connects the upper gardens to the spring, she says. We didn't ask anyone. We just knew it needed to be done. The path is narrow, winding, and smells amazing. A week later, she admits they might let it grow back because the bees were upset. The village listens to its bees. You're starting to get it now. This isn't a place run by systems. It's run by relations. Not organizational flowcharts, but conversations over fences. Not policy memos, but shared dinners. If something needs changing, it changes slowly, after being talked about, walked around, and possibly ignored until it solves itself. There's a strange peace in that, a kind of civic meditation, where nothing is expected to be fast, efficient, or perfect, just kind of adequate and deeply human. As you round a corner, you hear laughter. A group of women are weaving long grasses into garlands, not for decoration, for insulation. They'll be stuffed into the gaps above the windows to keep bugs out and breezes gentle. One woman offers you a garland. You look like you could use a little protection, she says. You have no idea what she means. You accept anyway. At the bakery, a chalkboard announces next week's meeting topics. Festival firewood, sheep noises, and the mystery of the vanishing ladles. Underneath, someone has scrawled, also, bring cake. You smile. The sun dips behind the hills, casting long, golden rays across the roofs. The town hall, such as it is, sits quietly in the fading light, still, serene, and slightly slanted. And you think, maybe governance isn't about efficiency. Maybe it's about giving everyone a seat, even the cat. Maybe it's about letting problems breathe before smothering them with solutions. Maybe the world doesn't need more meetings. Maybe it just needs better roofs and someone to stir the tea. You wake up to a strange sound. An ancient wooden door creaking open not from age or wind, but because someone's nudging it with a goat. You sit up and peer through the tiny round window of your borrowed room, just in time to watch a villager gently guiding the animal indoors with a mix of clucks, whistles, and what can only be described as polite threats. The goat appears to be carrying a Wi-Fi router. You blink, but no, your eyes aren't deceiving you. The goat trots inside a house where, moments later, a small LED light glows softly in a second-floor window. Someone yells, "It's on!" from across the lane. Welcome to the technological contradictions of the mud village. For all its cob walls and medieval charm, this village isn't frozen in time. It's just selective. Electricity exists here, kind of. Wi-Fi, too, sometimes. But both run on a mixture of solar panels, recycled wiring, and whatever salvaged equipment a cousin working in Sofia felt guilty enough to donate last Christmas. One household has a full setup, laptop, solar battery, and a homemade satellite dish fashioned from an old soup pot and a CD with a smiley face drawn on it. It sits on the roof, held in place by 2 bricks and what you suspect might be chewing gum. They stream weddings. They share recipes. They argue with relatives on video calls. all from inside homes that could collapse if a really determined squirrel ran into them too hard. The contrast is charming, sometimes absurd. You meet Even, the village's unofficial tech guy. He's 24, wears a t-shirt that says 404, shirt not found, and lives in a mud hut with fiber optic cable snaking through the window like a vine trying to evolve. Ivan speaks fluent code and fluent cow, often fixing internet problems mid-milking. He proudly shows you his rig, a desktop tower cobbled together from 3 broken ones, cooled by a fan originally intended for drying cheese. His Wi-Fi password? Try the bread first. Ivan hosts movie nights in the village square. Once a week, he strings up an old bedsheet between 2 homes, hooks up a projector, and streams films powered entirely by solar-charged batteries. Last week's lineup? A nature documentary followed by The Matrix, which caused one elderly woman to claim her house had been hacked by ghosts. Ivan brought her soup the next day. Peace restored. But not everyone's on board with this slow digital creep. Some elders refer to the internet as the whispering wire. They say it changes people's posture, makes them hunch and blink too fast. One man insists Wi-Fi made his tomatoes grow sideways. Others are more diplomatic. It's useful, but don't let it replace the fire. Even Ivan agrees. We connect when we need to, he says, but if the signal's weak, maybe it means you should go outside. The signal is often weak, by the way, not because the routers are bad, but because cob walls are excellent at blocking frequencies. Thick earthen walls plus thatch equals an accidental Faraday cage. So villagers adapt. They put their phones on windowsills. They climb trees. One woman insists she gets the best connection while lying on her roof with a saucepan on her head. Scientists, of course, have theories. Some suggest that the moisture content in cob, combined with its density, creates a natural dampening effect on EM waves. Others say the village simply lies in a digital valley. But here, the explanations are more poetic. The walls like silence, one woman tells you, they're allergic to noise. Still, the integration continues. You visit a household where a teenage girl is filming a clay pot tutorial for her TikTok followers. Her grandmother mutters in the background about the good old days, but also makes sure the camera catches her better side. The video goes mildly viral. A week later, a tourist shows up asking for the house with the sassy grandma. She's been insufferable ever since. Tourism is another unexpected intersection of mud and modernity. A few families rent out rooms through obscure booking sites. Their listings boast phrases like immersive pre-industrial charm and limited power, unlimited peace. Guests are encouraged to bring socks and leave expectations behind. Wi-Fi isn't guaranteed, but stories are. And when the power does go out, which it does often, it's not a disaster. It's just Tuesday. Out come the candles, the radio, the card games. A neighbor brings soup. Someone fetches an accordion. One man tells the same story about a fox who once tried to steal a melon. Everyone groans, then listens. You walk past a cluster of houses where extension cords snake like vines between windows. They're not legal, not efficient, but they work, most of the time. In this part of the village, electricity is a community project. If your fridge needs power, you borrow from the neighbor, who's not using theirs. If your phone dies, you bring it to Ivan's charging bench. First come, first plugged. It's not about being off-grid. It's about being on village. People here aren't technophobic. They're just grounded. literally and figuratively. They believe in balance. Screen time, followed by sky time, Wi-Fi and well water, a charging port and a candle stub side by side. You pass by one house with a satellite dish mounted proudly on its thatch roof, pointing exactly the wrong direction. Decoration, the owner admits. People assume we're fancy. And then there's the village grapevine, faster than any 5G network. A piece of gossip whispered at the bakery is halfway across the valley before the bread even cools. You ask Ivan if he's ever tried building a proper mesh network. He shrugs. We already have one. It just runs on curiosity and bad memory. And still, the contradictions continue. A toddler walks past with a stick in one hand and a smartphone in the other, streaming cartoon frogs singing Bulgarian nursery rhymes. He stops, pokes a beetle, then goes back to watching. He's barefoot, happy, unbothered. You sit on a stone bench and open your phone. No signal, of course. But a moment later, a woman walks by and offers you a warm pastry wrapped in a napkin covered in someone's homework. You looked frustrated, she says. Eat this. You smile. Maybe that's better than Wi-Fi. By now, you've gotten used to the feeling that this village isn't so much a place as it is a mood, one that's soft around the edges and smells vaguely like firewood and fermented plums. But nothing quite prepares you for what you find beneath the floors. It starts innocently enough. You're visiting a house owned by a woman named Penka, who insists on showing you her pride and joy. You expect a hand-embroidered tablecloth, or maybe a particularly charming goat. Instead, she lifts up a woven rug and opens a trapdoor. Inside is a miniature ecosystem. The crawl space beneath her house is alive, not metaphorically, but truly, unambiguously alive. You hear faint scuttles, see tiny movements, and then she points them out. Worms, beetles, fungi, a single slow-moving toad that blinks at you with disinterest. It's not a pest problem. It's a design feature. These are my roommates, she says, like she's introducing coworkers. Turns out, many of the cob houses here rest on layers of packed soil, intentionally left connected to the earth. No concrete foundations, no plastic barriers, just compressed dirt, straw insulation, and a few curious critters who help keep the house ventilated, clean, and some say emotionally balanced. Worms keep the ground loose, Penka explains, and the mushrooms tell you when something's wrong. You think she's joking. She isn't. There's a small colony of puffball mushrooms growing along one edge of the crawl space. She shows you how their color changes slightly with shifts in humidity. If they start turning gray, we check the roof. It means moisture's sneaking in. Scientists still argue about the symbiotic relationship between fungi and human dwellings. Some claim these organisms help filter toxins and regulate moisture. Others scoff and call it superstition. But again, this village doesn't care much for debates. It cares about what works. And Penka's house works. It smells earthy but clean. The air is cool and fresh. The walls are solid, and the mushrooms apparently are happy. As you crouch there in the dim underfloor twilight, you begin to appreciate just how porous this place really is. Nothing is sealed. Everything breathes, shares, cooperates. Walls let moisture pass. Floors let life pass. Even the ceilings, made of woven reeds and clay, have gaps for spiders, birds, and the occasional overly confident bat. Upstairs, you notice another peculiar thing. None of the floors creak. You expect groans and squeaks, like in most old houses, but here it's all muffled and soft. That's because the floors are packed earth, sometimes layered with linseed oil, other times simply smoothed and patted daily with a broom made of tied twigs. Walking across them feels like stepping on old velvet. And the smell? Earth. Honest, rich, humic earth, not musty or stale, just alive. You visit another home and find something even stranger, a floor that's moving very slowly, almost imperceptibly. One section of the floor undulates gently. The owner, a wiry man named Jordan, notices your look of alarm. "Don't worry," he says. "It's the beetles. They're just rearranging." Apparently, a colony of dung beetles has taken up residence under part of his house. And while most people would call pest control, Jordan just marked the area with a ring of stones and avoids stepping on it before noon. "They do good work," he says. "Break down the food scraps I toss through the trapdoor. In return, they ask for very little, just space." You're not entirely convinced, but the floor is holding up just fine. Better than fine, actually. It's spongy and warm, like a heated mat. Jordan claims his house never freezes in winter. "The composting helps," he adds, casually sipping tea that smells like cloves and hard decisions. Elsewhere in the village, you find other underfloor arrangements. One woman has dug shallow channels beneath her living room to direct rainwater away from the house. Another has a natural root system growing under her kitchen, a leftover from a tree that used to stand there. The roots remain, woven into the soil like forgotten plumbing, now hosting entire families of mushrooms and bugs. And no one sees any of this as unclean or scary. It's just part of the contract. You live on the earth, then the earth lives with you. There's even a bit of folklore about it. Villagers say the creatures under your home reflect the mood of the house itself. Happy homes attract soft-bodied, helpful critters. Worms, butterflies, toads. Unhappy homes? You get centipedes. No one trusts centipedes. One woman tells you she evicted her ex-husband, partly because after he moved in, she saw 3 centipedes in 1 week. "They never came back," she smiles. You're not sure if she means the insects or the man. You visit a schoolroom. Again, more of a wide mud hut, with chalkboards nailed to the walls and chickens sometimes wandering through the doorway. The children sit cross-legged on hemp mats atop earth floors. The teacher explains that the school was intentionally built without artificial flooring. "They should feel the ground," she says. "It teaches them balance." There's a break in the lesson. The kids scatter. Some run outside. Others start turning over small stones near the corner of the room, examining bugs and whispering findings to each other. No one tells them to stop. In fact, they'll probably get extra credit for correctly identifying soil beetles. By now, you've forgotten what tile floors feel like. You're used to the slight give of packed dirt, the occasional crunch of a stray pebble, the faint cooling sensation of moist clay underfoot. You realize you've stopped flinching when something scurries past your toes. You even nod politely to a small frog who hops across your path and disappears into the shadow of a broom. Outside, the village paths mirror the inside ones. Soft, slow, imperfect. Plants grow along the edges. Bugs hum in the heat. You see one man carefully lifting a clump of moss from under his front step, talking to it like an old friend. And honestly, you get it now. You've slept in houses built by hand, sat in kitchens with no angles, stared at ceilings shaped like upside-down baskets. But it's the floor that finally convinces you. This village isn't above the earth. It's part of it. So the next time someone asks what lies beneath your feet, you'll smile and say, patience, worms, maybe a toad. You're invited to dinner by a woman named Stefka, whose house you almost walked past because the front door is disguised as a herb garden. She waves you in, barefoot and flower-dusted, and leads you straight into her kitchen, which looks less like a room and more like a clay sculpture someone forgot to stop shaping. The stove is built right into the wall, round and squat, with a soot-blackened chimney that gently exhales the scent of baked garlic and something faintly sweet. She points to it proudly. Made it myself. Used to be a bathtub. You don't ask. The table is set for 8, though there are only 3 guests so far. 2 neighbors and a goat, who is very clearly not supposed to be there, but is pretending to be a stool. The plates, the bowls, even the cups are all made from the same clay as the house. Stefka fired them in her own backyard pit, which she casually refers to as the crater. You don't ask about that either. Everything you see, touch, or taste tonight has been pulled from the same patch of earth. Dinner begins with bread, flat, chewy, and sprinkled with wild thyme that she grew between her window and a laundry line. It's served on a plate with a chip in it that Stefka claims was made by a very rude cat. The cheese is tangy and soft, made from sheep's milk, and stored in a clay jar shaped like a pine cone. The pickles crunch like fresh snow and smell vaguely of dill and old victories. Then comes the stew, thick, slow cooked, and bubbling gently in a pot that's more art than cookware. The entire thing, pot and all, was placed directly into a fire earlier that day. Now it rests on a trivet carved from an old cartwheel, sending up steam that curls along the curved ceiling like it's trying to find the moon. You ask about the ingredients, and Stefka grins. Mostly weeds. Turns out, dinner includes lamb, wild garlic, nettles, and something she calls sleeper root. When asked what that is, she says, "You'll sleep well. You take a bite. You will definitely sleep well." This is not farm to table. This is hole in the backyard to table. The mud that built the house also shaped the cookware. The herbs that seasoned the food once grew in the walls. The firewood was gathered by hand from a patch of forest you passed earlier today. Even the salt was traded with a man who walked 5 hours to get here with a mule and a bucket full of brine. The conversation flows gently around the table, like soup around a wooden spoon. The goat eventually gives up pretending and is led outside, sulking. A man with eyebrows that belong in an opera house tells a story about a dinner party in the 1980s where someone brought canned peaches and everyone thought the world had ended. The younger guests laugh. The older ones sigh and nod. You dip your bread again. There's a quiet intimacy to this dinner that's hard to describe. Maybe it's the way the room glows amber from firelight and beeswax candles. Maybe it's the clay bowls warming your hands. Maybe it's the fact that the food tastes like it remembers the soil it came from. There's no rush, no clinking cutlery, no competing sounds of TV or dishwasher, just soft laughter, the scrape of a spoon, and the occasional burst of wind pressing gently against the rounded windows. You glance around and realize how much of the kitchen is alive. There are jars of fermenting vegetables on the shelves, each softly bubbling, like they're whispering to each other. There's a clay pot filled with honey, sealed with a slab of beeswax. There's even a loaf of sourdough on the counter that Stefka swears is older than her cousin. The starter was my mother's, she says, and her mother's before that. I feed it every day, like a cat that doesn't shed. You ask her what the most important part of the kitchen is. She thinks for a moment, then points at the wall. That, she says, the house itself. It remembers every meal, keeps the warmth, holds the smell. You could cook nothing for a year, then light one match, and it would still smell like soup. Scientists still argue whether clay walls actually retain aromas on a chemical level. Some say it's just porous memory. Others call it nonsense. But here, the theory is unanimous. Mud remembers. The dishes are cleared with slow precision. No dishwasher, no running water even. Just a basin, a kettle, and a rag made from an old blouse. The plates are scrubbed gently, not because they're fragile, but because they're familiar. You don't rough up something that shared your stew. As the fire dies down, someone brings out dessert. Plums, sun-dried and rolled in ground walnuts. No sugar, no flour, just 3 ingredients, one of which might be love. You're not sure anymore. The goat is scratching at the door again. It's ignored. You're given a small clay cup of rakia, fruit brandy so strong it might count as a solvent in other countries. It smells like regret, but tastes like warmth. You sip. It burns. You smile anyway. The room claps. Outside, the stars are thick and glowing like breadcrumbs dropped across a dark path. Someone opens the window to let in the night air. It carries the scent of wood smoke, baked bread, and damp earth. It's the kind of smell you could fall asleep in. As you help wash up, Stefka gives you a small dish to dry. That one's crooked, she says proudly. I made it after I argued with my sister. You can still see the dent. And you do. A little thumbprint on the rim, pressed deeper than the rest. Somehow, it makes the plate more beautiful. Because here, even the tableware tells stories. Even the clay gets emotional. And the dinner you just had wasn't just food. It was a memory shaped by fire, fermented by time, and served on the very stuff the house is made of. You'll sleep well tonight. Even if the goat sneaks back in, it starts to drizzle sometime after midnight. Not a storm, not even a real rain. Just a light, steady whisper from the sky. Like the village itself asked for a rinse. You're awakened by the sound, though it doesn't disturb you. Quite the opposite. It feels like the earth is sighing with relief. Outside, the mud paths glisten, the leaves drink, the thatched roofs relax into their natural shape, shedding droplets like tired dancers after a long performance. And all across the village, walls begin to soften. Not alarmingly, not in a pack-your-bags way, just gently. The top layer of the cob absorbs the moisture, darkens, and begins to pulse with life again. You see it happen firsthand on Stefka's house. Small cracks vanish. The surface swells slightly, like it's remembering its previous shape. It's not melting. It's hydrating. In this village, rain isn't the enemy. It's a renovation tool. You walk through the morning mist and spot a man kneeling beside his home, smoothing out a section of wall with a flat piece of wood. He's not rebuilding. He's just reshaping. Reteaching the wall how to be itself. This is called replastering, but around here, it feels more like massage therapy for your house. The man, Georgie, explains the process between strokes. The cob dries, then it cracks, then it drinks, then it heals. He dips his hand into a bucket filled with wet straw and clay. You can't rush it. You have to wait for the wall to ask. You think he's joking. He's not. Georgie works slowly, humming an old folk tune that matches the rhythm of his movements. The wall doesn't resist. It welcomes the attention. The new layer blends with the old like wet paint on a familiar canvas. When he's done, he stands back and nods, not satisfied, just in sync. Scientists still debate whether repeated replastering makes a cob wall stronger or weaker over time. Some say it seals cracks, adds resilience. Others argue it's just cosmetic, a village version of makeup. But for Georgie and every other builder here, it's not about structure or looks. It's about relationship. You maintain the wall like you maintain a friendship, slowly, often, with both hands. Further down the lane, you see more of this quiet ritual unfolding. A woman presses a trowel against her doorway arch, smoothing out a lump. A child refills a clay bucket with water, then dabs it on a window ledge with a sponge shaped like a hedgehog. A grandmother squints at her porch and mutters something about last year's lazy rain. Then she spits into her hand and gets to work. You pass a home that seems to be made entirely of patches. Each segment is a different shade. Some dark brown, some beige, some nearly white. It looks like a patchwork quilt, sewn from mud instead of fabric. The owner emerges with a steaming cup and gestures toward it proudly. Built by 12 people, over 16 years, with 7 types of soil, she says. This bit, she points to a pale chunk above the doorframe, was a gift from my sister's farm. Terrible for vegetables, perfect for walls. Even the rain has hierarchy here. A light drizzle is beloved. It softens the cob, makes it workable. A heavy rain is tolerated. It rinses the dust and reminds everyone to check their roofs. But sneaky rain, that misty nonsense that creeps in sideways, absolutely despised. Gets into your elbows, one man tells you, as if rain can sense joints. But mostly, the rain is useful. It signals the time to fix, to knead, to remud the corners that got brittle during the summer sun. The entire village becomes a low-tech spa for houses. Buckets appear outside doors. Straw bales are dragged from sheds. Wooden trowels, old spatulas, flat stones. Anything flat and friendly becomes a tool. It's a collective effort, though no one announces it. You just start fixing your wall, and before long, your cousin drops by with fresh straw. A neighbor lends you her best smoothing rock. Someone passes by with a hot roll and nods toward your uneven corner. You don't take offense. You smooth it. The roll helps. Repairs are like gossip, inevitable and more fun when shared. You learn how to read the walls, too. A vertical crack means too much sun too fast. A diagonal one means weak footing. Crumbling at the base? The ground shifted. Or someone leaned their bicycle there again. Yes, that happens. The walls are forgiving, but they remember. Some villagers use ash in their repair mix. Others swear by goat manure. One old man swears at goat manure and insists on using wine sediment. His house smells amazing, but tilts slightly, like it's been to one too many weddings. You're handed your own bucket. It's warm, heavy, smells like earth and rain and possibility. You smear a little on the outer edge of a step that's crumbled. It feels like sculpting, like baking, like returning something to the world that it was missing. The clay sticks. You press it flat. It holds. Just like that, you've made your first contribution. You see now why people love this part. It's not just maintenance, it's meditation. A slow conversation between human and home. You give it mud, it gives you shelter. You press your fingerprint into the corner, just because. It'll fade, but for now, it's yours. Across the lane, a group of kids are decorating a wall with handprints and mud spirals. Their mother watches, half amused, half resigned. It's their wall, she says, until it rains again. Some villagers get fancy, adding lime wash, painting floral patterns, embedding colored tiles into the mud like fossilized confetti. One house even has a tiny mirror mosaic near the window, meant to reflect evil spirits or nosy neighbors, depending on who you ask. As evening falls, the village smells like wet earth and wood smoke. The walls gleam slightly, their surfaces renewed and content. The rain has stopped. A light wind picks up, drying everything just enough to hold shape. You look around. Everything is the same. And everything has changed. Not dramatically, just gently, softened, reblended. Reminded that even things built from the ground up need a little care when the sky gets involved. And tomorrow, if it rains again, well, good. There's always another patch to make. The school bell isn't a bell. It's a cowbell, technically, but it's tied to a piece of rope and hangs from a tree limb outside the smallest school building you've ever seen. The sound it makes is cheerful and a little confused, like a goat trying to remember a song. The kids come running anyway, some barefoot, some not. All of them covered in varying amounts of dust, sap, and questionable jam. The village school has exactly one classroom. 2 if you count the garden out back, which the children definitely do. It's built from cob, of course, with walls thicker than a mattress and round windows that let in light without letting in distraction. Inside, there are a few low tables, some lopsided chairs, and a mural of animals painted by children who clearly had strong opinions about giraffe proportions. The teacher, Militsa, greets you with a nod and a cup of nettle tea. She's somewhere between 30 and timeless, wears a woven dress with clay smudges near the hem, and speaks like someone who has mastered both algebra and cloud watching. She's not just the school teacher. She's also the music instructor, the emergency medic, and occasionally the village historian. Today's lesson is a mix of math, weather prediction, and, because the weather's good, mud maintenance. Math first, she says, writing numbers on a slate board with a piece of white clay. Then we patch the back wall. No one complains. These kids know how to multiply, how to sing in 3-part harmony, and how to identify 5 types of soil by taste alone. They also know how to patch cracks, build a small oven, and make a perfectly symmetrical ball of mud without looking. One particularly confident child named Vesco claims he can find the right mixture of cob just by squishing it in his armpit. The other kids dare him to prove it. He does. It's disturbingly effective. This isn't some performative throwback to rustic life. It's just the curriculum. The blackboard lists today's objectives. Count and compare leaf sizes. Fix the classroom window ledge. Learn the story of the sheep that outran the postman. Snack break. You accompany the class out back, where the back wall of the school is showing some wear. A small crack, a crumbling corner, a patch where someone carved "Iva was here" with a stick. The kids surround it like surgeons prepping for a procedure. Each has a job. One mixes, one carries water, one applies. A small group critiques the texture. Another tests the thickness by throwing a ball of it against the tree to see if it sticks. It does. Applause all around. Militza watches quietly, only stepping in when someone starts decorating the wall with acorn caps. Later, she says, that's for art class. Scientists still argue whether practical, place-based learning has long-term educational benefits. But if you ask these children, which you do, they'll tell you more about thermal mass, erosion, and structural load than most adults with mortgages. Back inside, the classroom smells like beeswax, pine needles, and pencils sharpened with pocket knives. The walls are curved, not just for charm, but because they amplify sound just enough to make one voice reach everyone. The ceiling is high and domed, with a hole at the top. Part skylight, part ventilation, part spiritual design choice. Light spills through in a soft, dusty cone that feels like it was placed there by a stage director. You ask Militza how long the school took to build. 4 years, she says, but we didn't rush. Of course they didn't. Each section was done as a community. Parents, grandparents, children, even the baker, who apparently got roped into building the floor because he had a good eye for level dough. The desks were crafted from a storm-fallen beech tree. The chairs were sanded by children who earned extra jam for doing a good job. The door handle is a polished deer antler found in the woods and voted on by the students. It won unanimously against a carved turnip. You notice how quiet it is here. Not silent, but soft. The cob walls mute harsh sounds. When someone drops a book, it doesn't echo. When a child laughs, the room catches the sound and smooths it out like a lullaby. Even the chalkboard has rounded corners. There's a corner shelf with books, mostly handmade or donated, covering topics from composting to constellations to the Great Chickpea Incident of 1967. A child pulls one down and begins reading aloud, feet swinging gently. No one shushes. No one interrupts. It's just understood. When a story begins, everything else pauses. After lunch, which consists of bread, cheese, pickled carrots, and an experimental pear muffin, it's back to work. Today, that means helping an elderly man named Stoyan patch the cracks in his front step. The whole class marches over like a cheerful construction crew, armed with buckets and snacks. Stoyan greets them with mock grumbling. "Don't mess it up like last time," he says, gesturing to a spot where the wall bows slightly inward. The kids giggle. One of them pats it like a pet. As they work, he tells them stories, not in any planned order, just as they come to him, about the time the river flooded, about the traveling circus that got lost and set up in the potato field, about the goat who could open doors. The kids listen, laugh, and keep working. This is education, too. Later, they walk back to school in a slow line, smudged with mud and glowing with pride. One child has made a tiny brick from leftover cob and named it Bricky. Bricky is now the class mascot and sits on the teacher's desk. You realize this school doesn't just teach kids how to pass tests. It teaches them how to live with their surroundings, how to build without fear, and how to laugh when the wall caves in, because it probably will, eventually. And that's okay. Militza walks you out at the end of the day. The cowbell clinks faintly in the wind. Children scatter toward home, some stopping to say hello to goats, others racing barefoot through puddles with a kind of joy that can't be scheduled. This place, she says, is slow, but it makes good people. You nod. It's hard to imagine a better report card than that. It was bound to happen eventually. You're walking past the lower orchard when you hear the unmistakable click of a phone camera, followed by a gasp, and then, oh my God, this place is so aesthetic. You don't even have to turn around to know what's coming next. The tourists have arrived. There's a trio of them, each wearing some combination of linen, vintage sunglasses, and an expression that says, "We've discovered rustic authenticity, and it is adorable." One of them has a drone. The other is wearing a straw hat, far too clean to have ever seen a field. The third is already kneeling beside a pile of firewood, framing the shot just right. The village isn't bothered. Not really. It's not the first time a photographer or influencer or documentary artist has stumbled in looking for the soul of rural life. Usually, they spend a weekend, post some filtered mud wall selfies, and disappear back to the city with stomach aches from drinking water straight from the spring because it looked clean. But this group, they've brought props. You watch as they arrange a still life on a wooden table near the bakery. A cracked mug, a sprig of lavender, a slice of rye bread that isn't theirs. One woman pulls out a lace shawl and drapes it over a chair. Another opens a book, not to read, just to place artfully beside the mug. It's upside down. It's a lot. Some villagers find it amusing. Others shake their heads and keep stacking firewood. One child mutters something about the Instagram people and disappears behind a haystack with a smirk. Then, inevitably, someone leaves a gate open. Not just any gate. The gate. The one that separates the main village from the hill pasture, where approximately 29 goats, 4 sheep, and a very judgmental donkey live. You don't hear the gate creak open. You do hear what happens next. A thunderous, unmistakable bleating, like a war horn made entirely of livestock. The goats are loose, and they are enthusiastic. What follows is best described as gentle chaos. The animals fan out like they've trained for this. Within seconds, one goat is on a porch roof, 3 are licking a cartwheel, and the donkey is standing directly in front of the influencer with the drone, glaring into the lens like it owes him money. You help herd them, eventually, with the aid of a broom, a sock, and an open bag of cornmeal. It takes an hour, during which the tourists mostly take photos. One of them, to her credit, puts her phone down and actually helps. She grabs a rope, says, "I've done yoga, this is fine," and somehow manages to corral 2 sheep into a courtyard using only arm gestures and well-placed compliments. She's invited to stay for lunch. The others are less welcome. Afterward, over bowls of hot bean stew and slightly scorched flatbread, the villagers share their thoughts. Some are amused, others are tired. Most agree that the drone should be given to the goats. One man, Nikolai, puts it simply, "We don't mind visitors, but don't come here to make your life look better. Come here to make your heart slower." You learn that tourism is a delicate thing in this village. Too much, and the place stops breathing. Too little, and the bakery struggles. Some visitors come and truly listen. They eat what's offered, help patch walls, learn to carry water from the spring without spilling. Others want a backdrop. The difference is easy to spot, and yet the village adapts. It always has. One family now offers rooms for rent, not fancy ones, just tidy clay-walled spaces with beds that smell like lavender and damp wood. They list them online under titles like "Earth House for Quiet Souls" or "The Room That Whispers." guests are gently warned. The rooster may crow at midnight. The walls are not symmetrical. The window might host a bee. If these are problems, there's a hotel an hour away. Others offer classes: cob building, sourdough baking, weaving goat hair into something vaguely decorative. The classes are real. The goats, occasionally, are not cooperative. You visit a guest house run by an older couple, Raina and Beezer. They've hosted visitors from 20 countries, though they still struggle to understand why someone would fly across the world to photograph mud. "We've been trying to escape it for centuries," Beezer jokes, then adds, "But maybe that's the point. You have to return to what you were trying to leave." They show you a notebook filled with guest entries, pages of messages in crooked handwriting, written by candlelight. Some are in French, others in Korean. One just says, "Thank you. I cried next to your oven. It helped." Raina smiles. That's a good review. Not all guests understand. One man complained the floor was too warm. Another asked if the walls came in different colors. A couple tried to plug a hairdryer into a socket that hadn't worked since the Bush administration. The villagers laughed, then helped them dry their hair over the fire. The couple left with new friends and a jar of pickles. Tourism here is less an industry than an agreement. You give time. You receive slowness. You trade expectations for stories. If you're lucky, you leave with a bit of mud under your fingernails and the sensation that your shoulders dropped an inch. But it's fragile. Too many cameras, too many hashtags, and the place could shift. Not collapse, maybe, but harden, like a cob wall that dries too fast in direct sun. Cracks form, the texture changes, something essential is lost. So the village walks a line. Open, but not performative. Welcoming, but not decorative. And as the goats are finally coaxed back through the gate, the influencer with the straw hat sheepishly offers an apology. The villagers accept it. They even pose for a group photo, with the donkey front and center. No one smiles. That's the tradition here. But you can tell they're amused. After all, the village isn't a museum. It's a living place. Just don't forget to close the goat gate. It's late afternoon now, and the village has softened once more into that dreamy rhythm, somewhere between doing and resting. You follow a narrow path past the communal laundry line, where shirts flap like sleepy birds, and toward a house that almost hums as you approach. You're here to meet Lilia. She's not a healer exactly, not in any official way. But she is the one villagers visit when they're tired in ways they can't quite name. Her house is known for its warmth, not temperature, but tone. It welcomes you in, makes your knees relax, your thoughts slow. Even the birds seem to chirp softer near her walls. The moment you step inside, you get it. The smell hits first. Clay, dried calendula, honey soap, and the faint mineral tang of wet stone. The light inside isn't bright, but it's golden, filtered through a wall of dried herbs that hangs between two rounded archways, like a curtain of memory. The walls here are smoother than most. Still cob, still earth, but carefully burnished with a flat stone until they feel like polished skin. Embedded in them are bits of old pottery, mirror shards, and glass beads that catch light and scatter it gently across the floor. It's not decoration, it's therapy. Each glint reminds you to notice. You sit down on a low bench with a woolen cushion, and the bench sighs beneath you like it's relieved to have a job again. Lilia offers you tea made from something unpronounceable, sweetened with molasses and stirred with a stick. Not a spoon, she says. Spoons argue with the clay. You believe her. She explains that the house was built slowly, lovingly, with the idea that it wouldn't just shelter, but heal. Every inch was made with hands that had something to release. One wall was built entirely by women who had lost someone, another by a boy with a stutter. The floor was packed by foot, no tools, just music and stomping and laughter. Lilia swears that if you sit long enough in one spot, your thoughts slow to the pace of the wall's last heartbeat. Scientists still debate the claim that cob homes improve emotional well-being. There are studies about humidity levels, electromagnetic shielding, and psychological effects of organic shapes. But none of them mention the feeling you get here, that deep spinal sensation of being held. Lilia calls it remembering the inside. She shows you her sleeping room, round, of course, with a ceiling like the underside of a mushroom. The bed is built directly into the wall, like a nest. The mattress is stuffed with straw, herbs, and dried rose petals. The sheets are hand-woven linen. The pillow smells faintly of lavender and humility. She doesn't have a clock. When the birds start shouting, I wake up. You notice something else unusual. No sharp corners. Anywhere. Even the shelves curve. The room has no harsh lines. No visual stops. Your eyes glide from floor to ceiling like a slow breath. This, she explains, helps the nervous system. Straight lines make people brace, she says. Curves make them remember their animals. There's a quiet bowl in the corner. That's what she calls it. A quiet bowl. Just a wide, low clay dish where you're encouraged to drop thoughts. Write them down. Breathe into them. Leave them there. The house will hold them, she says. You don't have to. You walk outside with her and see more examples. One home has a grief wall where villagers press flowers, ashes, and notes into the cob after a funeral. Over time, the wall absorbs them. They become part of the structure. Another home has a wish niche, a tiny alcove where children leave pebbles and feathers, and sometimes their most important hopes scribbled on birch bark. Then there's the walking path, a soft spiral made from packed earth and dried herbs, used by villagers who need to walk in circles until something inside shifts. No one mocks it. They call it thinking with your feet. Back at Lilia's, she shows you a jar of dust. It's not just any dust. It's house dust, collected during renovations. She keeps it because she believes the old layers hold lessons. Each crumble, she says, reminds you what needs softening. You sit again. You sip the tea. The wind picks up, rustling the herb curtain like a sigh. There are no sounds of traffic, no fridge humming, just the pulse of wind, the breath of walls, and your own heartbeat slowing to match. This village doesn't just build homes, it builds habitats for the soul. And these homes, in turn, tend to their people. A cracked wall becomes an excuse to visit your neighbor. A leaking roof brings people together with buckets, ladders, and jokes. A warped floor is a story in waiting. A cold draft isn't a complaint. It's a conversation between the earth and the sky, passing through your toes. As the sun begins to dip, you ask Lilia what she thinks makes these houses different. She doesn't hesitate. They forgive you, she says. You think of all the places you've lived. White walls, sealed windows, sharp corners. Places that demanded stillness, cleanliness, obedience. And here, in a house made from patience and thumbprints, you are allowed to be uneven, like the floor, like the door frame, like life. And maybe that's the secret. Not that these homes are strong, but that they are gentle. You sleep in one of the houses that night, a guest room curved like a seashell, tucked behind a vine-covered wall and smelling faintly of chamomile and fresh dirt. The bed is built directly into the wall, rounded like a bowl and packed with layers of wool and straw, topped with a blanket that weighs just enough to remind you you're alive. It doesn't creak. It doesn't rock. It doesn't hum with the electric tension of modern buildings. Instead, it breathes. The walls are thick enough to muffle the outside world, yet somehow they don't trap the air. They move it. You can feel a coolness against your skin that isn't from a breeze, but from the walls themselves, slowly balancing temperature, moisture, even sound. It's like sleeping in a cave sculpted by kindness. Above you, the ceiling curves inward and up, creating a dome that holds silence the way a cupped hand holds water. There's a single clay lantern in the corner. You blow it out. The darkness settles around you, complete and soft, like velvet pulled from the drawer of a very old tailor. And for a moment, maybe a long one, you feel like you're inside a living thing. The next morning, you wake without an alarm. No jarring buzz, no LED glow. Just the sound of footsteps on earth and the gentle clinking of spoons and mugs. Sunlight filters in through a small window, shaped like an almond, and lands in a patch on your feet. It feels like a greeting. You dress slowly and step outside. The world hasn't changed, but you have. Everything feels more textured. The scent of mud and mint feels crisper. The light on the cob walls seems warmer. Even the breeze through the trees sounds more polite. You realize the home you slept in wasn't just shelter. It was companion. It didn't isolate you from nature. It translated it. The walls murmured the night to you. The floor reminded your heartbeat to slow. The roof caught your dreams and sent them back to you gently, softened and reassembled. And you're not alone in that feeling. You talk to Elena, who moved back to the village after 10 years in the city. I couldn't sleep in my apartment, she says. It buzzed, it hummed. It made me feel like I had homework due. Now, she lives in a one-room cob home with a mossy roof and a door that squeaks like it's asking a question. She says she dreams more now and remembers the dreams. Sometimes I think the house dreams too, she adds, only half joking. You meet a man named Crumb, who swears that after a month in his mud house, his arthritis improved. It's not magic, he says. It's the walls. They never chill your bones. They always hold you like a blanket. He knocks on the wall, gently, like you would knock on a friend's door. There are stories, too, about people who came here just to rest for a week and ended up staying for years. Not because of the view, or the food, or even the community, though all of those are wonderful, but because of the homes, the way they curve, the way they echo, the way they never judge you for lying down in the middle of the day and falling asleep with a warm rock on your chest. Some villagers say that cob homes reset your clock. Not your wristwatch, but your inner time. The body, they believe, has rhythms the modern world scrambles. Noise, light, stress, steel, glass, all of it disrupts the quiet inner drumbeat of being a person. But here, in these homes, the rhythm returns. Scientists still puzzle over the psychological effects of soft architecture. Why do curves relax us? Why does clay make us feel calm? Some believe it's tied to evolution, natural forms, cave memories, the primal security of the womb. Others think it's simply the absence of mechanical noise and visual clutter. The villagers don't theorize. They just smile when visitors fall asleep during lunch. You meet a woman named Dora who teaches breathing exercises in her front room. Not yoga, not meditation, just breathing. She sits you on a bench, tells you to close your eyes, and says, "Match your breath to the ceiling." You try, and it works. Not instantly, but slowly, gradually. Your breath gets heavier, warmer, and quieter. You feel it sink. You feel the tension fall out of your shoulders. The room begins to stretch, not physically, but emotionally, like it's making space for your thoughts to rest. Dora says she built the house around her breath. Each curve, each niche, each wall thickness, designed to cradle the kind of quiet most people never make time for. You walk through the village again that evening. The homes glow faintly, catching the last amber of the sun. A few doorways are lit with candles. One window has a moth pressed to it, wings fluttering like a slow fan. A man waters the base of his wall, not because it's dry, but because it's thirsty. You pass a house with no door, just a hanging cloth, moving gently in the wind. Inside, you see someone asleep on a bed built from mud, covered in wool, resting like a pebble at the bottom of a stream. And then you realize these homes aren't shelter. They're lullabies, shaped by hands, smoothed by rain, whispered into existence by people who knew how to live with the world, not on top of it. You return to your guest room. The bed greets you like an old friend. The walls don't creak. The air doesn't hum. You lay down. You sigh. The ceiling listens. And you sleep. Soft, deep, whole. The village fades now, gently, like the last embers of a fire sinking into ash. The homes you wandered through, lumpy, lovely, breathing things, settle in your memory as if they've always been there, just waiting for you to slow down, to notice the curve of a doorway, to press your hand into cool clay, to listen for the hum of walls that hold not just warmth, but time itself. The scent of wet earth still lingers, soft, grounding, like someone turning a page just once before sleep. You can almost hear the distant echo of quiet laughter, the scratch of a trowel against a wall, the muffled clink of mugs being set down beside a stove. And in this space, between wakefulness and dreaming, the village remains. Not a place pinned on a map, but a rhythm, a slower beat, a deeper breath. One where homes remember you, and the soil forgives every heavy footstep. Let your shoulders sink. Let the softness of rounded walls and rain-smoothed stone wrap around you. There are no clocks here, no wires humming, just the steady, ancient comfort of something built from patience and love and mud. You're safe. You're held. The house is listening. Let it carry you now. Into silence. Into sleep.